Hi, my name is Sarah Glassmeyer, and I am the Director for Data Curation at Legal Tech Hub. Today, I'm joined by Otto, the founder and CEO of Midpage, and he is going to tell us a little bit about the background of this product, as well as give us a brief tour. So, hi, welcome.
Hey, great to be here again. We actually had a first product briefing 2 years ago, I think. It must have been one of the really early ones, and great to be back.
Oh, great. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in legal tech?
Sure. As you said, we're a legal research platform. And since I'm a computer scientist, it took me a while to get there from my background in robotics to legal research. So my first startup was in robotics. We did deep learning with cameras for outdoor robots. That was extremely fun. And after that, I was doing research on language models and how they can be applied to large scale search use cases. And that was just sort of around GPT-3. And at the time, I wanted to start a new company again. I had lots of friends that were in law school or that had started their first jobs. And so I spoke to everyone that I could find and decided that for me, the most exciting problem to work on is to take this enormous corpus of case law and make it much easier to navigate, because that's the one thing that language models are probably best at, is just like reading huge amounts of information for you and then helping you navigate that large text file.
Yeah, I was thrilled to death when I saw this on the schedule. Like, I raised my hand, like, please let me do this, because obviously I'm a former law librarian. I love legal research tools and seeing how they are evolving. So I think first let's talk a little bit about what's under the hood. So what is the content we're using? Because like, legal research can mean many different things for many different people. We do have a global audience. So, what kind of coverage do we have in Midpage? And also, how is it using generative AI? You kind of like started from the LLM. That's it. Another interesting thing, like coming from computer science, then getting into law. How are you using this technology on content? You know?
That's a great question. Maybe one more follow-up. We're now based in New York, right? So everything we do is based on US, because case law is so country by country specific. Even though I was actually working in Germany at the time, I then moved to the US as soon as I started a case law company, because that's the only place you can do this. And we focus on litigators and sort of the type of legal research that involves, navigating case law or statutes and regulations. This means really the daily driver for people that are going to court or preparing memos. And as you know, as a law librarian, that's a really big task. A third of the average lawyer's time is spent doing legal research. And this is like sifting through case law, most of it, which is mostly searching and reading insane amounts of text. And often you're just skimming because there's so many pages to scroll over, and you're just trying to find and trying to orient yourself among this huge corpus. But yeah, the bigger picture is case law used to be really hard to get into. No startup would have been able to try this a couple of years ago because creating the data set was impossible. So I'd love to talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We were briefly chatting about this. There's two kind of problems that were standing in people's way. And the first one I always think about is like getting the content was just impossible. But now there's several sources for updated, both historical case law back to the beginning of the country, 1700s we're talking, as well as constantly updated. So it is as fresh as you need. But the thing that you brought up that I thought was really interesting is the manpower needed, or the person power, to actually process all this. Because I've had friends, their first job was being an editor for a legal research company and doing all that manual tagging and manual analysis. But that's not the case anymore, is it?
Yeah, like I said, we do have all coverage now, like full coverage of most of the essentials that people need. And this means we have case law from states and federal. We have all unpublished opinions. We don't have state trial courts, but most people don't use those, at least not on a regular basis. And this would have been impossible to do a couple of years ago. And I actually last week gave a sort of a seminar talk on the history of case law and who had it and who copyrighted which parts and why it was so difficult. And it's just really interesting to see how every country evolved in a similar idea with sort of different facts on the ground. Like we all know the sort of publishing players in the US, they're obviously many centuries old at this point, and they just had physical books that they've been just published online, and they were the only ones that had that. But now the courts are, and have been for a couple of years, publishing all those same cases on their own website. So in theory, anybody can just go and build a data set for that. Now the problem is that those are 5,000 different courts and around 400 different websites. So it's actually a huge amount of work to collect all the data set that way. But there's a second part that is much bigger than that even. So after you've collected all the cases, you have to do a lot of processing. Even though in theory, what the court publishes, that should be the law, but the whole legal research industry has gotten used to the idea of head nodes, of a citator, and you can't really do any real work without a citator, right? Without knowing, has this case that you're looking at, has it been overruled or not? What are the cases that cite this case? And all of that is very important. And in it, throughout the history, that was the main reason why only the two old players now had all the status, because they were the only ones that could afford having an army of 2,000 human editors that manually format and label, okay, this case is connected to this other case and it was overruled here. And then they write a custom head node. And this work, if you do it every day for thousands of cases, that is actually not something that humans are ideal for. AI is at this point smart enough and probably more consistent than those humans are. Everybody knows that AI can write good head notes. It can even do them more customized as to what you actually care about, rather than doing like the general one-off one. But it can also, be used to build a great citator and to get all this other annotation work. And so now, for the first time, building a case law data set went from absolutely impossible, without the resources of a Westlaw, to sort of actually, if you put in the time and effort, it's now doable but hard.
Yeah.
And so we're really proud that we achieved sort of this full coverage level and have our own site data, which is really good, on par with the big ones. We're waiting on there's some academic articles coming out to compare them, but looking very good. And so this is going to be a new era where this whole corpus of the law becomes so much more accessible, and people can build all sorts of new services on top of that. And we're trying to be the new search engine on top of that, but there'll be lots of other things too.
I think before we do a demo, I kind of thought, well, we would just kind of give people a preview. What makes Midpage special? Like, why should someone go with you guys instead of one of the legacy products?
So a few things. One is we're around 5 times cheaper than all the other players you're used to. And people do say that it's much easier to use, much faster to get started. But the second, the really interesting part is, if you have a really difficult search where maybe you've struggled for a couple of hours or a few days even, and you don't seem to be finding the cases that you're looking for, even though there should be a case like this. I know it exists, right? We're really good at finding the needle in the haystack. So really good for the difficult searches. And we'll show you during the demo whether sort of you get that same impression, but our interface is not a chat. It sort of looks a bit like a hybrid between you and old, but it really helps you, among all the cases, find exactly the ones you're looking for. And that's what we do.
Great. I'm really excited to see it.
Okay. So, at this point, we're being used by over 100 law firms, from solos to our A&M top 10. And some use us to replace Lexis and Westlaw or the other tools. Other use us more like case text, right, as sort of a complement, where we have some really cool search features that, especially in big law, users use both side by side. Now, what I'm going to show is just a simple example from a non-compete. So I can type in here my sort of standard demo, and you can see it's a Boolean sort of keyword search, but the search engine under the hood is already extremely good. And then Boolean searches, even though they're sometimes hard to learn, they are still more precise and powerful than doing it without, at least for somebody. And so, of course, we have many results. So what I'm going to do is just filter this down to, I think you're from New York, right?
Yeah.
So filtering the restriction down to New York, and we still have 500 results. And so this is where we can start doing the interesting stuff. And then what you see here so far, this is quite familiar, right? This is just a list of cases with some sort of preview about what the cases show. But we're not going to sort of narrow this down much further and have this really cool grid of spreadsheet to understand the search results. And as an example, I know that maybe for my client, in our case, the geographic limitation is relevant and the duration of the non-compete is relevant. So before I read every single one of these cases, I'm just going to ask some more questions by adding a column into the spreadsheet. So I can say, what is the geographic location of the non-compete? And now what I get is one answer for every one of these cases as a new column.
Oh, wow.
And you can see the first one says it's a 90-mile radius. The second one says a 300-mile radius around New York City. And the third one says it actually does not have a geographic limitation. And of course, now, if I want to show me the language, show me the case, I just click onto this source here, and it scrolls to the section where I find the exact language.
That's good. So there's two things, both of those. One of the things I think, like, people who aren't really familiar with using generative AI on their daily basis, or especially with legal applications, like the first thing they say is hallucinations. What about hallucinations? But one, I like that you have the pinpoint to the source and people can actually read it and confirm for themselves. But also it does say, I don't know, or in this case, it doesn't specify. So it's not going to make up an answer if it doesn't have one. It will tell you the
Exactly.
decision didn't specify. That's great. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. We're really just trying to bring you to the right section and giving them much more structure while you do that, right? So that you don't get overwhelmed by all this information. Imagine if you had to open all of these and scroll until you find this. Okay, but so let's take this one step further. We have a couple more questions and we can just add them as a second column. And let's say I want to know, is the duration over 5 years? And imagine what you would have done before. So if you want to see cases with a long duration, the problem is that they're actually quite rare. Most of them will be much shorter than 5 years. But if this is what you're looking for, you would have had to open a lot of different cases without having really a helpful way to do this with keywords, right? Because you can't really say 6 years or 7 years or anything like that. And so you would have had a sub-ideal search and had to open every single one and just spend a huge amount of time doing that. And instead on Midpage, what you do is you add this as a column, and you can see that we're getting these answers broken down into yes, no, or maybe. But of course, they're all no, because it's actually quite a rare condition. Actually, the first 6 are all no. But we can now just filter across this. And we see that actually 6 out of the first 100 do have a over 5-year non-compete. And this is how you very quickly find this sort of needle in the haystack, right? This is where you can really specify, I want to see this kind of case. And even if it's very rare, this is how you'll find it.
Yeah, I mean, this is really neat. That's the thing, like, as I was just saying, like, Boolean search is really powerful, but it can't do this. Like, you need to be able to, like, create those kind of filters on the fly and have a contextual question that the LLM can, like, do that, make that filter for you. That is really, really cool.
Thanks, yeah. I'm gonna show one last example, which sort of more of a different direction, but the same spreadsheet idea. So let's say your client gave you a bunch of details around the case, and you would like to see, for those 6 cases that seem interesting, how do they sort of in general compare? How do the facts compare to my own case? And so I can just, if I have a short description of my case, I can just add that in here. You could also upload a PDF, and it's going to do that automatically. I'm also going to add the motion type, which here is a motion for preliminary injunction to be granted. And now we're just giving there a bit more context about what we're looking for. And if I now add the compare facts column and maybe also the favorability column, we can see some more interesting things. So you can see for every case, this is from any search, right? You can see a list of similarities and a list of differences. So here it says both cases involve a former employee leaving for a direct competitor, but this non-compete was tied to the sale of a business and it's not a standard employee relationship like in our case. And so I immediately understand, well, would have been nice to use this case, but the fact that it's not what I'm looking for. And so this is a great way to understand your search results much better. And the same maybe for the second example, both cases have looking for injunctive relief to enforce a non-compete, but okay, similar idea again, like this one is a sale of a business, which is not quite comparable. And so yeah, a new lens to look into these cases. And of course, what we also see is, sorry, yeah.
I'm just like, this is fascinating. I've never seen this, I don't think, in a product. Just the ability to really kind of manipulate the fly and really hone it to your specific needs at that point. This is really cool.
Thank you. We hope that being an associate is going to be a lot more fun in the future.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the second thing here is the favorability column. So this is just looking at the motion type and the outcome. Here it says, well, actually, we want this to be granted, but here the court denies it. So we should just be aware that this is not coming out our way. And so that's sort of the main thing that we're known for and that people try out first. There's a second thing that we just launched, which is, you're probably very familiar with the story of case text, and everybody remembers their parallel search. And the idea behind that was really good. And the platform got shut down recently, but we sort of built our own version of a feature like that. And so sometimes keyword searches are more precise, but other times you're really trying to find something where the exact words don't matter, but you want to find a statement or a proposition, and of course that said something like that. And so it's just a different type of search and a totally different example. So I'm just gonna jump over here and show this other kind of search. So instead of clicking keyword search here, I'm just going to click proposition search. And here what we see is, maybe I should filter this down by jurisdiction as well. But what we see is now we're going to have this proposition column, which just shows us exactly the language we were looking for. And it's a very different search engine under the hood. But sort of, when you see this, you understand, oh, it's just like another spreadsheet.
I really like this because being a law librarian, I know I look at research databases a different way. And like constructing searches just comes naturally to me now after doing it for 25 years. But this is like what normal people do, so this is like, a normal person is not going to try and construct a real Boolean search this is like anyone can go and like, okay, this is actually what I'm looking for. And I don't know how to phrase it or where to look, but I can put the proposition in. I mean, I just think you've really like made the barrier to entry for searching a lot more available to people with this.
So we had some former K6 users reach out to us and said they really love the old, parallel search, and they really need this because there's different moments. Like even if you're very advanced, sometimes you need this other way of searching because keyword search is not very flexible when it comes to spelling mistakes, or if they use a different word to bring across the same idea. That's when keyword search is not so good. And that's where proposition search, this is actually an AI under the hood, but not Gen AI, the old kind of AI. And what it does is exactly. It looks at the sentence, and from all things that courts have ever written, it tries to find a paragraph that contains a similar idea and then shows that paragraph.
Yeah, so it's just like such a different way of attacking the information pile. I love it. Yeah. It's very neat.
Exactly. And then, of course, this is Gen AI time, so we do have a chat experience as well. I think this is sometimes great when you're just getting to know a new field and you can ask a question. It will do a bunch of different searches for you and compile it all into a small paragraph and include a couple different citations. And it really does this the same way an associate would, right? It's you can upload documents if you want, but what it does is does multiple different searches. It shows you what it's searched for. It then looks at every one of the results and decides, is this a good case to use to answer the question, or is it maybe similar sounding but actually misleading or talking about a different issue? And then it compiles everything into a nice paragraph in the end with a bunch of citations. And I really like, me as somebody who's not a lawyer, I really love this interface of chat that feels a bit like ChatGPT. But I think most litigators on our platform, they really always use our grid search.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely interested to see, like, as time goes on and, what are the new associates class of 2030 as they've grown up with using more of a chat interface, if they're going to prefer this kind of interface or how that's going to change how humans are interacting with these text. So it's kind of nice to have options. And also, I used to never think I'd like chat, but now the more I use it, I actually kind of like it. So see how people like it. Yeah.
Exactly. No, I think the chat is going to get a more common concept over time. And the students that are using Midpage are using chat a lot more than the litigators, maybe for part good and part bad reasons.
Yeah.
It's it's easier, it saves some of the work, but then you don't always understand it to the same level of depth.
Yeah, but also I mean, like anyone like new to a subject matter, that's kind of great. Doesn't matter how long you've been practicing. If something new to you, it is a kind of a great way to ease your toes into a subject until you can really get your hands around it and understand what you should be looking for.
Exactly. And so we're what we like is that we want to make this easy and accessible so everybody can just go sign up for a free trial. And it's a 2-week trial where you can just go explore the platform. There's no different tiers. Like you don't have to, when you buy Midpage, you get access to everything on Midpage. And we have lots of students, lots of litigators from small and big firms, and curious where the journey goes from here.
Thank you so much. I have really enjoyed this tour. And speaking to you, just learning about all the history and background of Midpage. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for everyone checking in with another LTH product briefing. I'm Sarah Glassmore, Director of Data Curation. We have Otto from Midpage, and we will see you again next time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot. Nice to be here.